The next set of lessons, we're going to review some of the items that will be on the FAA knowledge exam for the small unmanned aircraft exam. And just a reminder, you need to go to the FAA and download or read through online the Part 107 study guide written by the FAA, very handy, covering a lot of the material that we're going to cover here in the next 8 weeks. So this is a review to prepare you for the test. At any time during the video, you need to pause, think about it, write down if you have a question or don't quite understand what's going on. You contact me. You have my office hours. You make an appointment, come and we can one-on-one go through this material. I'm available. Text me, email, and I'll try to answer your questions. I don't know everything, but I almost know everything. So anyway, that's what we're going to do in the next few weeks. Today, just as a review, we see this little chart. This is basically telling you roughly what proportion of the questions on the test will pertain to particular items. So this course is called Regulations, but I am going to need to cover a whole variety of the questions involved here. But just so you know, regulations could consist of up to 25% of the questions on this test. 60 questions, right? So 25% could be a significant number. There could be up to 15 questions on regulations, for example. But what I'm going to be going over several few weeks is all of these items here. Operations could consist of up to 27 questions about those, operations, airport procedures, emergencies, maintenance. That gives you a rough idea of what the test is going to consist of. Now, let's talk about the test just a little bit. Everybody should be familiar somewhat with basic tips for multiple choice tests. This is a multiple choice test, and especially relevant to spend a few minutes to remind you of these basic tips. Remember that all the questions on the exam are multiple choice, 3 possible choices. Just a reminder, if you're stuck on a question, instead of trying to obsess over the correct answer, try to identify first the incorrect answers. There's not always, but often there's a ridiculous answer, and you can scratch that off right away. By the way, this is an electronic test, so just be aware of that. You will have availability to have a piece of paper with you to make little notes, although you're probably not going to be allowed to take those notes home, so don't try to copy down the answers or the questions, although it'd be wonderful if you could. But you'd be surprised really how many answers you'll find if you instead look for the wrong ones first and then start eliminating them. There will usually be one obviously incorrect answer, like I said, and you can eliminate that. So now you have the 2 options to choose from, and it doesn't feel quite as psychologically defeating when you just have 2 choices. Not to mention that gives you a 50% chance of, no, we never really want to rely on the chance answer, but you do want to know the material, and you ought to be able to know the material. All right, sometimes there'll be 2 correctest answers, right? I made that word up. But one might be correct in one circumstance, while the other one might be always correct, and that's what they're looking for. Concept of the most correct answer. So sometimes you'll have to, of those 2 leftover answers, you need to find the one that's least correct, or least incorrect rather, and eliminate that as well. And if you come to a question that's you're not really sure about, I believe that on the electronic test you have a way to mark that question as I'm not sure, and so that at the end of the test, before submitting the answers, you go back and review those questions again that you're not really positive about. It's a possibility, right? Remember to read the question again. Part of the tips are read the question, read every word of the question, make sure you understand what they're asking. Take note of negatives like which answer does not apply, right? So don't jump into the conclusion, right? You'll see an answer that looks, oh, I know that's right, and click it as, no, they're not asking that question. They're asking which one doesn't apply in this circumstance. The FAA is asking questions. They're not interested in you just memorizing facts. They want you to understand what underlies the principle there. So the questions they don't give out the questions and answers. We have people's memory that they submit and let us know, I remember this question, And so that's how we have our list of questions. And they do change questions because things change, right? Regulations change, but they change them because they don't want it to become such an easy test that people can memorize through it. They're interested in you knowing the concept behind it. Use the legend on the chart. You have a testing supplement. Remember, I've given that out. I've given a copy of the testing supplement. And you should remember that we should have that at home by now. I've taken out a bunch of the pages. It's a testing supplement that covers commercial, or at least private pilots, sport, aviation, some other categories. So there's a lot of that doesn't apply to you. You'll have all that stuff. But they'll ask specific. You've already gone through those questions. So they ask for figure 28, area 2. So this one here that I've made is just merely a copy of theirs. It's not copyrighted. But remember to use that, especially when you come to charting and all that. They have a listing of what's on the edge of the chart in the legend. So you want to use that when you come to a question that have given you a hard time, like Class B airspace. Well, it's marked on the legend in the chart. The testing supplement that will be provided for you at the testing time. And by the way, if you don't have your copy, you can just go online, then you can do the search for it. FAA testing supplement for remote pilot certificate, and you can find it online. So if you've lost it, too bad. You can find it. And remember to use the other pages of the testing supplement. Before the test, it might be a good idea to be familiar with that testing supplement of all the little, especially the map chart diagrams and that information, just so you understand what all the symbols are. So you don't have to spend a whole lot of time at the date of the test to figure out stuff. This is an electronic test again, which is given at a testing center. When you get there, before you start the test, because it's a timed test, ask the attendant if you're unsure of how to use the testing machine. Don't jump into it without making sure you understand all the options and all the abilities. Can you pause the test, or can you mark your questions you're not really clear about? Can you mark that some way so you know which ones to go back to? Make sure you have a pencil or a pen and some paper so that if you can't mark the answer, or the question rather, you can write down the question so that you can remember to go back to it if you're not really sure about a question. Remember that as you're going along, you will find questions like, oh man, I can't remember this at all. Don't obsess over it and spend 45 minutes trying to figure out one question. Just move on, keep going. When you get to the end of the test, something during the test might have sprung your memory again about the answer to that one. So at the end of the test, you go back to the ones that you're not sure about. All right. Sometimes another question will remind you of the previous question that you weren't sure about. Make sure to review your questions before submitting the test for grading. Definitely go back over it. Make sure that you understand, or that you've at least answered all the questions. Don't leave a question unanswered, because again, there's probably out of 3, there's one that's not obviously wrong. So you got a 50-50 chance. If you have no clue about a question and make some kind of answer, don't leave it. Don't be surprised at questions you've never seen. The FAA is testing understanding and not memorization. So they're going to add and change questions from time to time. Use your common sense and think carefully about your answers. Take your time as well. The test consists of 60 questions. You're given a couple of hours to complete it. Plenty of time to do 60 questions, right? If you divide it up, you got a couple of minutes for each question. Plenty of time. Don't go to the testing center if you have to be somewhere else during the day, or if you're preoccupied with some other issue going on. If don't show up at 4:30 and be rushed through the test. Plan that whole day free so you can go there in the morning, spend the whole time as long as possible. Arrange things so that you're able to give your full attention to taking the test. After answering all the questions, go back, double check each answer. Perhaps want to do that a second time. Don't get in a rush. Okay, we have a couple of trick questions that have been determined. Here's an oddball one. How long does it take for one mixed drink to exit your system? All right, think about the question. Are they asking about the legal limit? Are they asking about a regulation? Or are they simply asking a question about alcohol in general? Well, that matter of fact is what they're doing here. They're not asking, I don't know if it's a trick question or not, but they're not asking the 8-hour limit. They're asking 3 hours. Basically, it's a physiological question rather than a legal question. Saying, one mixed drink, this does not mean that you can go fly the drone after 3 hours after having a drink. You still have the 8-hour legal limit, but that's the question they're asking. So if you see this one, at least don't be totally shocked or confused. When is pressure altitude equal to density altitude? We've talked about that before, and a little later in this course we're going to review that. But again, remember that they're asking simply when are they equal? Obviously, on a standard day. Standard day, what is that? That's atmospheric pressure 29.92 millibars and temperature 59 degrees centigrade. That's a standard day. And when the day is like that, pressure altitude is equal to density altitude. All right, another so-called trick question. Weather report lists the ceiling at 800 feet. What's the highest you can up your UAS? See, they're asking for comprehension, right? You might say 400 feet. But no, you remember this VFR weather minimums. You have to have 3-mile visibility. You have to stay 500 feet below the cloud. So now you got to go through and subtract 500 feet from the 800, and that gives you 300 feet. Answer is A. Not that tricky, really, but again, be careful not to jump to conclusions. One of these answers might have been 400 feet. And it would be easy to jump to that and keep on moving. Oh, I'm in a hurry. I got to finish this test because I got to be at the dentist office, or I got a date with my whatever. Nope, don't jump to conclusions. Make sure you understand. Okay, Airman Certification Standard Concept. The FAA makes it really clear in their testing standards is that they're looking, the goal basically is ensure that the applicant, that's you, possesses a knowledge consistent with the privileges of a remote pilot certificate with a small UAS rating, as well as the ability to manage the risks of flight in order to act as a remote pilot command, right? So there's some general overview statement about the examination. That's their goal, is to ensure the applicant possesses knowledge consistent with the privileges. So they sit down and plan, develop, and maintain materials related to the certification process. The knowledge test measures many of the aeronautical knowledge areas listed in CFR 14.107 and Part 89. And they publish supplements like the FAA Part 107 study guide, and they coordinate with instructors and schools to make sure that the students are gaining this kind of information. That includes risk management as well, and other items that maybe not be obvious. Okay, to the user right off the bat. But okay, these are the knowledge areas that you'll be tested on. Don't be overwhelmed by the items here, but these are the items that we'll need to cover in the next 8 weeks. As a reminder, we've already covered these items. I just want to remind you of that previously in the courses that we've been taking, we have covered all of these items. At least I've done my best to cover it. And with the testing that we've done so far, you've been tested on this material and you have demonstrated your understanding of this material. There will be a test I'm going to attempt to have a test every week of example FAA questions, which will again test you on your ability to understand this information. So take those tests seriously. I, as the instructor, need to sign off on your taking this test. So If you go to the FAA testing, if you go to a testing center and you fail the test, that reflects on me as well as you. I have total confidence that you will be able to pass the test, though. But I just want you to know that you need to demonstrate to me that you know this information before I'm going to sign you off to go take the written test. And of course, you're doing that to graduate the Southern Crescent Technical College course on for a technical certificate in UAV flying. These are the items that need to be covered and will be covered on the written test and my tests as well. Okay, so this is I'm going to cover here probably extensively the new regulations for the drones. There's several new regulations. This is Part 89, 14 CFR Part 89. So the remote ID rule, and you just search 14 CFR Part 89. You can read this too, but I'm going to just briefly try to cover it. This is the purpose of the rule is the FAA is doing their best to integrate drones into the national airspace system safely. Because again, they're interested not only in safety primarily, but also in providing or encouraging commercial aviation. And part of that is drones. Drones to be used commercially, deliver package and all of the other things, deliver cargo, you need to be able to keep track of it and be able to integrate it into the system. So anyway, remote ID rule is a first step so that they can keep track of who's flying and who's flying where and what. It's not only just enforcement, but it's also to start to develop a way to keep track of all these drones across the country as they're flying here, there, doing whatever. So anyway, what this does, it sets up a system where there's going to be a unique ID for the drone and for the control station both. And that unique ID will be linked with latitude, longitude, position of the drone, drone altitude, drone velocity, but also control station latitude or longitude, control station altitude, a time mark, and an emergency status indication. So if there's an emergency, it gets transmitted as well. Okay, so the industry, or not the industry, but the drone users are outraged because now the law enforcement can find you. Not just the drone. Used to be able, you could fly your drone over there, and if it disappears and crashes, now once this rule is in effect, they'll be able to find the control station, you, the person that's actually controlling the airplane, and they have some concerns about that, especially concerns the fact that, and they expressed this during the process of developing this regulation, objections, because anybody that buys the equipment can find you. So they're thinking, okay, a criminal could find you flying your drone and track you down and rob you or something like that. It's not that, I don't find that big of a concern, but that's a possibility. Just be aware of that when this rule comes into effect, you'll be able to track down the operator. And principally, this is to identify bad actors, okay? People that are doing bad things. There are people that are flying their drones over the prison and dropping little cell phones and money and cigarettes and stuff like that. Well, that's not right. You shouldn't ought to be doing that. So now the police will be able to run out there, find you, grab you, and whatever. For us, it's no big deal. But in order to provide the ability to fly beyond visual line of sight, we need to have some way of knowing who's what and where they are. The deadline for compliance for this remote ID is for manufacturers is 2022, September 2022, next year, next September. But for us that have a UAV already, for existing UAVs, you have an extra year beyond that. So we got till 2023 to fix our drones so that they can fly and have remote ID. So what we're relying on now is third-party manufacturers, or even the drone, DJI is probably going to come up with either a software fix that can be downloaded into the control that will provide for remote ID, or a module that you would have to pay extra money, probably going to do that, and you glue it to the side of your UAV that will transmit this information. And of course, it'll have to be one that is glued to the side of your controller as well. There'll be some way of coming up with that. They're still working on that. But if you buy a drone to use it in the United States after September 2022, it must have it all included in the drone. So if you're thinking about buying a new drone, you want to make sure to ask the question, is this drone remote ID compliant? Because if it's not, you're going to have to buy another module to add to it, or some other solution after 2023. But if you're going to buy a drone after 2022, you don't have a problem. But I would expect you all probably to want to get a drone before then. That's up to you. Okay, down at the bottom of this slide, you'll see how to comply. Like I said, aftermarket will be available, I'm sure. There isn't any now that I know of, but there should be an aftermarket solution to this. You may fly within a FAA Remote Identification Zone, FRIA, and that basically is like a school or an organization, a drone hobby club or something like that could develop an area and apply to the FAA to have an area where you don't have to do that. The application process, I'm not sure how you do that. I'm not sure that I'm even going to bother to do that at the college here, because we do so many field trips in different places, it just doesn't seem like, but we may do that. Or the other way to comply, of course, purchase a drone manufactured after 2022, right? All manufacturers will require to have that integrated into their drones as they sell them. Or at least if you're going to buy a drone before that, ask them first, make sure that they have already complied with this, which I would expect they would. We have exemptions though. Recreational flyers and drones 55 pounds or less are exempt. If you don't need to be registered, that's the rule, right? You have to register a drone if it's over 55.55 pounds. Or if you're doing it for compensation or hire, you don't have to, if you're not doing it for compensation or hire, you don't have to register it, then you don't have to comply with the remote ID. So little toy drones, no problem. But all Part 107 flights, if you're operating for compensation or hire, regardless of weight, require remote ID. So that's why you're getting the license, is so you are remote, or so that you can make some money. You got to have remote ID on whatever drone you're going to use to make that money. Doesn't mean you can't go out and play with your toy drone because you're not making money. But okay, so that's basically, it's a pretty comprehensive view. You can go to the regulation, obviously. I encourage you to do that, but I just wanted to cover that. There may be questions about that. This is a new thing, fairly new, so it'll be probably on the test, but I don't have any sample questions for that because it hadn't come to that yet. So switching gears now, there's another change, is flight over people, and this is CFR Part 107.39, also 107.110, also 107.165, also Subpart D, flight over people. So I'm going to briefly review that. You have 4 different categories. Category 1 is any drone that is 0.55 pounds or less is remote ID compliant and its rotating parts are protected. If so, that makes you Category 1. Are you today? Well, you have a Mavic Mini we'll just use that as an example. Mavic Mini, rotating parts protected. We do have the prop guards that we can put on it, but do we have remote ID? No. So we're not Category 1. Let's say we get remote ID. Could we be Category 1? All right, take your Mavic Mini, put the prop guards on it, take it over to the scale, weigh it. It weighs more than 0.55 pounds. Are we compliant? No. So taking your Mavic Mini and flying over people, nope, no can do. And yeah. Category 2 and Category 3, that's what the manufacturer does. We don't do that. We can't certify ourselves. The manufacturer certifies that. And there is a little exemption if you make your own, if you build your own drone, you can go through the application process with the FAA, but we're not going to consider that. We're not really interested too much in doing that. Category 2 and 3, you notice I put down impact energy restrictions. Basically, what the manufacturer needs to do is, if this drone falls and hits somebody on the head, is it going to kill them or cause serious damage? Or, you know, there's a lot more to it than that. I'm being really simplistic with that, but basically, it's how hard is that going to hit somebody. Not our concern, and not on the test, of course, except that we can't do it. It's manufacturer. Category 4 is for large drones to be developed in the future. Drones that need a minimum equipment list. It's for big drones carry heavy loads of cargo, heavier than 55 pounds, basically. So that really hasn't been developed. That's just for industry kind of drones. Yeah, you may be flying one of those in the future. Fine, but our big concern is Category 1. Category 2 and 3. Manufacturer. Okay, we'll keep going here. Operation over human beings. What does over mean? So this is, I guess this is more an FYI than it is a testing thing. But since this is a new rule, I wanted to cover this anyway. Probably not on the test, but let's just look at this and see what the recommended procedures are. The term over, according to the commentators for the FAA, refers to a flight of the small unmanned aircraft directly over any part of a person. For example, a small UAV that hovers directly over a person's head, shoulders, or extended arms and legs would be an operation over people. Okay? So you're at the beach, you fly over somebody's leg, that's over people. Similarly, if a person is lying down, for example, at a beach, an operation over that person's torso or toes would also constitute an operation over people. Flight, where a small UAS flies over any part of a person, regardless of how long the flight is over the person, would be considered an operation over people. So over means any part of the person. Just be aware of that. And, right, you can't just tell that person, oh, I'm going to fly over your legs. Is that okay? That doesn't give you permission to do that. The regulation says you can't do that. It's not like you can get permission from the people. Now, they could be part of the operation if they're a visual observer, or if they're another part of the crew that's working with you in this commercial UAV operation, then you can do that, right? But if they're just a non-participant, no. All right. Operation over human beings, open air assemblies. What does sustained flight mean? Okay, sustained flight is defined as sustained over an open air assembly includes hovering above the heads of persons gathered in an open air assembly, flying back and forth over an open air assembly, or circling above the assembly in such a way as the small unmanned aircraft remains above some part of the assembly is also considered sustained flight. Sustained flight over open-air assembly of people does not include a brief, one-time transiting over a portion of the assembled gathering where the flight is unrelated to the assembly. Okay, so if you pass over a group, apparently it's okay. If you're passing over the group intending to use that as a way to record images for the purpose of the assembly is a gray area that could be classified as doing it related to the assembly. So flying over a group of people is fine, but sustained flight means hovering over that. I don't have any more to comment about that. Another statement was, what is Operation Overhuman? What is an open air assembly? To be more closely defined what that is. FAA employs a case-by-case approach in determining how to apply the term over open air assembly, right? And they give some examples. Sporting events, concerts, parades, protests, political rallies, community festivals, or parks and beaches during certain events. Some potential examples that might not be considered open-air assemblies include individual persons or families exiting a shopping center, athletes participating in a friendly sports in an open area without spectators, individuals or small groups taking leisure in park or on beach, or individuals walking and riding a bike along a bike path. Whether an open-air assembly exists depends on a case-by-case determination based on the facts and circumstances of each case. So this implies that, to me, this implies that if you're being annoying, oh man, we've talked about this before. If you're being annoying, you're using your drone to annoy people, they're going to contact the FAA and report you. I don't blame them. Don't be annoying. And then this issue will come up. The case-by-case determination will be, you were annoying these people, and yeah, you were clearly flying over the top of people. You're in violation. So probably the best way to avoid getting in that situation is don't annoy people to the point where they're going to contact and blame. Now, sometimes it's totally unavoidable. Some people just hate the idea of drones and they're going to complain no matter what. Well, not much you can do about that. But try not to be annoying. That's the concept. All right, I'm going to go through several questions that might be on the test. And the sample question, under which operational requirement would the unmanned aircraft be restricted to visual line of sight operations? So this is specifically about remote ID. So A is like ridiculous. Not even, there is such a thing as AIDS B capabilities, but that has nothing to do with remote ID. Okay, so you're between B and C, and we haven't really discussed this, but as far as I know, there's only several questions on this. Specifically, if you have a broadcast module, this is the aftermarket thing, or that you put on your drone to make it compliant with remote ID. Stick it to the side. I'm not sure how you're going to attach it, but it's supposed to be attached to your drone, and a module attached to your control station to meet the requirements of the regulation. If that's the case, you must remain within line of sight operation. Apparently, the reason I don't like the question is that's pretty much the rule right now. You have to be line of sight operation. But apparently, if it has a standard remote identification built into the drone, you can fly out of visual line of sight. It's a confusing question. I'm sorry I can't give more light to that or make it more understandable, but you've got to stay within line of sight operation if you have a broadcast module attached to your drone. And I'll give you a second to read the bottom part. The bottom is 14 CFR 89.115 is where you find the regulations pertaining to that. All right. Here's another question. What must the person who is manipulating the controls of a small unmanned aircraft do if the standard remote identification fails during flight? Land the aircraft as soon as possible. That sounds reasonable. Notify the nearest FAA air traffic facility. Nah, that's when you ever do that. You don't need to do that. Activate the aircraft's navigation lights, I suppose, but what is that? Do we need navigation lights during the daytime? All we need is anti-collision lights at night and during twilight. So, wow, seems like 1A would be the answer to me, just logically going through there. Yep, land the aircraft as soon as possible. So this is not that difficult question. Still, it's one of those new ones related to the standard remote identification. Here's another one. Where must a small unmanned aircraft serial number be listed when using either standard remote identification or broadcast module? And the question is, the certificate of aircraft registration of the unmanned aircraft used in operation must include the serial number. So it's C, the serial number of the manned aircraft as required in Part 47 and 48, or the serial number of the unmanned aircraft must be provided to the FAA in a notice of notification pursuant to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So certificate of aircraft registration is the answer here. The aircraft's document of compliance is something that you would obtain from the manufacturer saying that this is approved. The manufacturer's method of compliance, that's just the issue between the manufacturer and the FAA. We don't need to see their method. We can find out if we want it, but we don't need to see it. Certificate of aircraft registration is must include the serial number of the unmanned aircraft. Right, another question, under which operational condition may you be approved to fly without remote identification capability? A, if the operation is being conducted in an FAA recognized identification area outside line of sight, that I wouldn't be sure about that. B, if the operation is being conducted for aeronautical research, I don't know, maybe. C, if the operation is being conducted at an altitude of 400 feet above ground level and below. No, I think after the date of compliance, everybody's got to fly. That would be everybody. So C, no, that doesn't seem quite reasonable, so it's got to be B. Process of elimination for some of these questions, and that's what it is. Answer A is incorrect because operations without remote ID are allowed within the FRIAs but must remain within visual line of sight. Answer C is incorrect because remote ID requirements are not restricted to specific altitudes. It has nothing to do with the altitude. Okay, here let's move on to flight over people test questions. Okay, to conduct Category 1 operation, a remote pilot command must use a small unmanned aircraft that weighs 0.55 pounds or less. That's one of the stipulations, but that's the correct one in this case. 55 pounds or less on takeoff and throughout the duration of each operation under Category 1, including everything that's on board or otherwise attached to the aircraft, which is why if you put prop guards on this 0.55 drone, for 0.55 pound drone, you're above the weight limit, you're disqualified, but the answer to the question, though, is 0.55 pounds or less. Which category of small unmanned aircraft must have an airworthiness certificate issued by the FAA? Category 4. This is the large, giant ones, and they're just like manned aircraft. Once they develop this whole system, they'll have airworthiness certificates that the manufacturer must prove that this is airworthy and that just like an airliner, or like any aircraft for that matter, and of course it'll have to have registration markings and minimum equipment list, etc., etc. So it'd be number 1, right? And we can process of elimination as well. The category 2 and 3 are just about the weight of the aircraft. The manufacturer has to do that. I'll give you a pause for a second to let you read that. Okay, another question. Which category of operation requires an FAA accepted current DOC? Okay, now you're scratching your head because I haven't mentioned DOC, I don't believe, but that is document of compliance. What have I ever told you? If you're Category 1, you need one of those things? No. But logically, we can say, who does that? The manufacturer. And the manufacturer needs to produce this document of compliance to the FAA. So it has nothing to do really with us. So it would, if it's something that the manufacturer does, it would be Category 2 and 3. Category 1, no, because it's not something we produce. Category C mentions 1 again. C, Category 1 and 4 mentions it again, so it can't be that one either. So by process of elimination, it would be Category 2 and 3. So this is one of these questions that definitely could be considered a trick question, simply because I haven't talked a whole lot about that. Document of compliance, or DOC, must be submitted by the manufacturer to the FAA. All right, another question. You are conducting a Category 1 operation over a moving vehicle with a human being inside. Because of such operation, the small unmanned aircraft A, may not fly directly over the vehicle, possibly. B, may maintain sustained flight over the vehicle for an extended period of time. I think we mentioned something about not flying over vehicles. So we're really down to A and C. Which is the most accurate answer? Well, apparently the most accurate answer is must not maintain sustained flight over the vehicle. Why C is correct is that you may fly momentarily over a vehicle en route to another location not related to that vehicle. The UAV may not maintain sustained flight over a moving vehicle. CFR 107-145. Your surveying company is a title supporter for a race team at the Indianapolis 500. To promote your new aerial surveying department, you decide to video part of the race using a small unmanned aircraft. The FAA has issued a TFR, though, remember, temporary flight restriction for the race in the area you plan to fly. In this situation, let's see. A, you may fly your drone in the TFR since your company is sponsoring a team at the race. That doesn't quite make sense because anybody can sponsor anything, but that has nothing to do with the airspace above the event. B, the TFR applies to all aircraft. You may not fly in the area without a certificate of waiver or authorization. Well, the first part is true. The TFR applies to all aircraft and you may not fly in the area. But possibly you may be able to obtain a certificate of waiver or otherwise an authorization to fly in that. It's possible. C, flying your drone is allowed if you notify all non-participating people of the closed course small manned unmanned aircraft operation. Well, since when does telling people that you're going to violate the regulation allow you to violate the regulation? Notifying non-participating people has nothing to do with it. So B is the best answer. And in fact, it is the correct answer as well. TFR applies, but you can try to get a certificate of waiver or authorization. Some places they'll grant you that. If you've proven that you can fly safely over the Indianapolis 500 race without the drone crashing into the stadium and hurting people or falling in front of one of the race cars and causing a massive accident, yeah, the FAA will probably approve it. But otherwise, you may not fly in a TFR. So that's the end of our little review of some of these questions related to flight over people and flight over with a mode ID, plus a review. So continue to go through this series or show up in class. We're going to talk about this stuff in class as well. But if for some reason you're unable to attend class, or if we decide to do this all virtually, you do again remember that I'm available during office hours especially, but and make an appointment if you're going to come by, because in my other courses I'm often not in the building, so you need to let me know when you're going to come by. Of course, you've got my email, you got my phone number, text me, email. Just remember, I'm going to subtract points from your grade if you text me or call me after 10 o'clock at night or before 6 in the morning, okay? I do need my sleep. But otherwise, let me know and we can talk about it. We can meet in person, one-on-one, or I'm available to help you through this material. If there's something that I've gone through too quickly and you need some more information to help you. And of course, the online quizzes that I've got every week will be helpful as well. As you take those quizzes and you make a note where you answer it wrongly, make sure that you understand why you got that question wrong. Don't just flip by it and say, oh, so what? Make sure you understand the questions that you don't get correct. Even the ones that you do get correct, make sure you understand why you got it correct, not a guess. Okay, so hopefully these tips are helpful. And I will see you soon. Bye.